Hello and welcome to Thursdays on the Stoop. Today we have Writing with the Stars with Marjorie Sarah Cottrell. Marjorie is a writer, astrologer, mom of two, explorer, and creative small business entrepreneur with a personal motto of learn, create, share. Her lively practice includes individual chart consultations, couples readings, astrology reading events for small groups, workshops, research, and writing centered on introspection, motherhood, paradox, and more. Through events and workshops, she marries her professional event planning experience with her passion for ancient astrological wisdom. Marjorie, we're so glad you're here. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Julian, and welcome in everybody. I'm so happy that you're taking time out of your schedule to explore this topic together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with what I have prepared for us today. Oops. Trying to make this full screen here. There it is. No, it isn't. There we go. Okay. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Writing with the Stars. My name is Marjorie, and I am in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I'm so honored to be a part of Blue Stoop's Philadelphia writing event here. So just a little bit more about me. Julian pretty much covered everything, but I am a graduate of Temple University School of Tourism and Hospitality. So if there's any other Temple Ls in here, I see you. And I have a passion for merging my event planning experience with ancient astrological wisdom. So that's a little bit about me. Here's what we're going to do today. So our agenda is going to flow like this. I'm going to give you a little brief intro on Hellenistic astrology, so we can kind of know the philosophical model that we're working within. We'll talk about what is a birth chart, and then we'll pluck two symbols from the chart: Mercury, the planet of communication, and the sun, the planet that really speaks to our purpose and our path. And we will explore those symbols through three writers' charts. And then we'll talk a little bit about using these insights. And I'm hoping that we'll have some time at the end for questions if you have any. So to begin, I would like to just say a couple words about intention setting. Intention setting is a practice of mine that I bring to almost everything that I do as a yogi, as a parent, as a writer. And the word intention comes from the root word intendere. I'm not sure if I say that correctly. However, it's Latin for stretching and purpose. So through setting intentions, we come to stretch, grow, and move towards purpose. A key piece in setting intentions is kind of planting the seed and then letting go of the expectation. So with that, I invite you to just kind of take a minute and think of an intention. It could even just be one word of why you're here today. Could be to learn something new, to focus in on your communication style, to expand your understanding of how you synthesize information, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about. So just take a second and think about why you're here. And I'll share my intention, which is to provide you with some new perspective and valuable insights, and to get the creative juices flowing on how you can access and act on your innate treasures. A lot of how I use the practice of astrology is as an excavation, an act of digging around inside of us and finding what treasures we already have. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Hellenistic astrology, the framework that I work within. So there are many astrologies, there are many kinds of astrology. I like to think of it as pizza. In New York, you can go to New York and you can get a slice of pizza from many different locations. It's formed through years of recipes from many different families and styles. It's very similar with astrology. Hellenistic astrology is the framework that I am trained and certified in. It's a tradition of horoscopic astrology practiced in and around the Mediterranean region between the 1st century BCE and the 7th century CE. This is the source of many of the modern traditions of astrology that still flourish today. Now, it's a really exciting time for Hellenistic astrology, particularly in the West, because in the 90s, there was a group of historians and astrologers who came together to translate Greek texts that had been lost in the West for thousands of years. But we needed Greek translators as well as astrologers so they could translate the language and then put it into practice and see what they were dealing with. So since that project, which was called Project Hindsight, if you're interested in looking it up, since that project in the 90s, much has been shared, and there is kind of a renaissance happening within this branch of Hellenistic astrology. So the basic tenets of Hellenistic astrology are that it's a system that incorporates the planets. I bet that wasn't a surprise for you. The signs of the zodiac, the concept of aspects, and the doctrine of the 12 houses. So I'll show you a little bit more of what that looks like. And just to reiterate, this is really just a high-level approach so you can understand the system that we're going to be working at. So what is a birth chart? This is what a birth chart looks like. It's essentially a picture of the sky at the moment of your birth from the location of your birth, and it can serve as a symbolic map. It's really useful for self-discovery, and what brought me to astrology was understanding people that are close to me, people that I love, particularly my children. That was how I found my way to astrology, and then quickly realized that there was much more to be learned. So if you did receive the worksheet that Julian sent out earlier today, or I believe that it was dropped in the chat, I put in there at the top, there's a link for you to download your own unique custom birth chart. You don't have to use that link. There's many places online where you can get birth charts, but one of the important pieces of Hellenistic astrology is that we work in whole sign houses. And the link that I sent to you is a quality link, and it will automatically set it up that way for you. So it was the smoothest possible way to download your chart. If you're not interested in downloading your chart, or you don't know how to do it, you can still, benefit from this session by not doing so. But if you were interested in doing it, it just takes a minute, so you could do it while we're working through this intro piece if you haven't done it yet. All right, so a little bit more about a birth chart and those 4 things that I said you'll find in a birth chart. This is kind of like your orientation. A chart involves these little symbols. These are the planets. They're just glyphs of the planets, and they're usually along the inner wheel. We'll also find the signs of the zodiac. They tend to be around the outer wheel. And then this is the part that really makes Hellenistic astrology special, in my opinion, and shine. These 12 sections, sometimes I call them pie slices. They're called houses. And if you look towards the middle of the wheel here, you can see these little numbers. Essentially, each house correlates with a universal topic or theme, and I'll show you what they are on the next slide. And I want to remind you that this is being recorded, so I have a few extra slides in here intentionally. If you wanted to go back on the recording and pause it, you can zoom in and do a little bit more detective work once you have your chart and you want to figure some pieces out. Before I show you what the topics of the houses are, the last thing I'm going to mention that we're not really going to get into, but this is just good to know, are aspects. Not only do planets in certain houses or pie slices speak about someone's strengths, weaknesses, purpose, intention of their lives, planets in relationship to other planets. So if they're making right angles, 90-degree angles, if they're opposite each other, these mean certain things. Some relationships between planets are very favorable based on how many degrees apart they are. Some are very challenging. So that's another way that we can get information from the chart. And I should also mention that I tried to make this accessible for people that have absolutely no knowledge of astrology, while at the same time including little nuggets for people that might be a little more advanced and want to go further. So if those advanced things come up and you're like, oh, I have no idea what that is, you can go ahead and ignore them, or you can come back around to them in the recording. So this is a little bit more about what those sections of the chart are, these 12 houses. In a word, I've kind of narrowed down what they speak to. So everyone's first house really speaks to the self. The second house would speak to assets and resources. And around the wheel it goes. These are not important to really know or memorize or anything, but just knowing that they exist and we all have these universal topics of career and partnership and family, like roots and identity, they're all laid out and correlate to each one of these houses on the wheel. This is just another version of the same thing that I wanted to include so that you could see it a little bit better if you're going back on the recording. And some of the benefits of knowing our chart are these are my particular favorites. Every astrologer has a different take on this, I'm sure, but for me, the reasons that I enjoy spending time researching astrology, working with clients on astrology, and using astrology as a tool in my own life for self-awareness, for my writing, for creativity, all of these things. The first one is self-awareness. It leads to a deeper understanding of ourselves, how we relate to ourselves, and that in turn cultivates empathy. Understanding of self can be viewed as a bridge to understanding others. And I see that as a path to peace. So that's my prominent reason of why I use and practice astrology. Another piece of this is there's a sense of feeling seen, kind of like something is reflected back to us on a very deep level. And this is unlike any other tool that I've come to know. Joy Lynn Okioke, who works at Kripalu Yoga Center, had said, feeling seen helps us to see others. That encapsulates so much of why astrology is so powerful, in my opinion. And then the last benefit that I really love is astrology can be used to befriend the paradox within us. It can reflect back to us like these two parts of our soul or our life or our path that we might not be able to reconcile, but they're both a piece of us. And sometimes when we can just see it in the chart, we can see the symbol speaking to us, we can navigate or dance between the two a little bit easier and learn to hold both of them as parts of our story. Okay, so just want to take a minute and pause because that was a lot of information, but it's important to cover so that we can go forward and know what we're working with. So this is really intended for you to have a high-level understanding of how this very vast and complex system works. All right, so from here, we are going to zoom in on two key pieces of the symbol or of the system and how these pieces can support your writing goals. These are the two symbols. Mercury, the planet of the mind, communication, skill, and the sun. This is the symbol of the sun, the circle with the dot in the middle. The sun speaks to our purpose, the plot of our life. So the way that this is going to go now is I have a few slides to really just kind of like tease out and pull apart the symbolism embedded in each one of these. And that will lead us to the chart examples. So if you have your chart downloaded, or if you printed it out, or if you have it accessible, now would be a good time to grab it because you might want to be like checking where these things are. And if after the session, you cannot figure out how to get your chart or how to download it or anything like that, I'll let Julian know that I'm happy to take emails to help you figure that out if you can't do that. So Mercury, our first symbol. Let's zoom in and consider how exploring the meaning of Mercury in your birth chart can support your writing and your life. Mercury is the planet that represents the mind, communication, how information comes and goes, how we take in information, our learning style, how we synthesize it and send it back out into the world. really important for writers, right? The winged messenger, as he was known in Greek mythology, Hermes, transfers information between the earthly and divine realms. We can think of Mercury as kind of a go-between. Now, all symbols in astrology contain layers. So when I say Mercury represents communication, you might say, well, how can he represent other things at the same time? Everything in astrology is layered or multifaceted, kind of like a gem. And if you hold it and the light hits it, something is illuminated. And then if you turn it, another facet is illuminated. This is how all of the symbols speak to us. So in addition to communication and synthesizing information, Mercury can also symbolize curiosity and skill, money and trade, games and sports. And Mercury is the smallest planet and deals with the smallest details, the fine print, the sharing of ideas, editing, punctuation, all of these things. So Mercury in our birth chart points to our learning style as well as our communication style, how we take in and deliver information, how we exchange ideas and use knowledge, and how we interact with others. All very important and key to writing. Okay, so a few more bits about Mercury. Mercury is connected to two signs in the zodiac. So this is going to be a little bit advanced and it might feel a bit confusing, but I think it's important to say. So every planet has a place in the chart, a sign that it is affiliated with, that place is very conducive to its nature. And it's empowered in that place or connected in some way. So Mercury has two signs that it is at home in, and they are Gemini and Virgo. So Gemini is Mercury's airy temple, its airy home. So a Mercury, it's kind of like Mercury has two different outfits that it wears. A Mercury affiliated with Gemini think this is an air sign. So we think ideas and fast movement and flowing freely. Mercury's earthy temple is Virgo. Virgo is a little more grounded, anchored, likes to kind of like deconstruct and understand things. A Mercury in Virgo can point to, among many things like skill with spreadsheets and punctuation and editing, reading tax documents, like all those like fine prints. Whereas Gemini would be like, let's go to the coffee shop and read me your ideas and things like that. So it can be helpful. This is advanced now. And the worksheet's not for the session, but it's for before, how I told you how to access your chart. And afterwards, there are sections where you can find where Mercury is in your chart, and you can fill out the worksheet and figure out a little bit more about your communication style. And we're going to go through tools that'll help you. Okay, so it can be helpful to find where Gemini and Virgo are in your chart. This might be for the advanced astrologers in here. And you can layer that meaning as it relates to your learning, your communication, and your writing style. And you'll see this as I do it in some of our examples. If that doesn't make any sense to you, you can just set that down for right now. And just a word about Mercury retrograde, because it's popular and in the media usually. This is something that happens 3 times a year. Basically, the planet Mercury appears to be going backwards from our location on Earth 3 times a year. It's a regular part of Mercury's cycle. So it's not quite as dramatic as it's made out to be. So there's no need to panic when this happens. But it is an invitation to reconsider, to revise, to review what we're working on. Any words that begin with RE would be conducive to doing under a Mercury retrograde cycle. So that is something that you can play around with. All right, so now that we know what Mercury represents, let's briefly think about the sun and what the sun represents. Let's consider where you are here to shine and how that may support your writing and your life. Now, I'm thinking that many of you are familiar with your sun sign. And just as your sun was in a sign, Mercury was in a sign, and the moon was in a sign, and they all mean things. But the sun is likely something that you might already be a little familiar with and what that means for you in your life. But adding on the layer of what house or what pie slice the sun is in can really help hone in on topics related to your purpose and how and where you are here to shine. And many times that may be through your writing and through your creative expression. Danielle Blackwood is an astrologer who I've spent some time studying with. She's also a Jungian therapist. She weaves a lot of myth and story into the way that she practices astrology. And when we think about the sun, she asks the question, who did you come here to be? How do you shine and what is your purpose? So we would look to the sun in the chart to find this. And when we do that, it's not really giving us any new information. It's reflecting back the little murmurs that we're hearing within ourselves. And there's something that feels very at home about that placement. So the sun's placement in our chart tells us where we're here to shine. Just like Mercury is connected to some signs in the zodiac, the sun is connected to or at home in the sign of Leo. In Hellenistic astrology, the sun points to your life path, the arc of your life. If your life was a play, this is going to be the plot. We will think about our life path as represented by the sun as the plot. So it also points to your unique creativity, our vitality, and our will. And the sun's story and location in our chart is also connected to our legacy. What are you leaving behind? All right, so now that we've covered that, we know what Mercury represents, we know what the sun represents. Let's look at a few examples. I have three writer's charts to share with you. The first is of Paulo Coelho. He is a lyricist and novelist. He famously wrote The Alchemist, and another piece called Without Solitude that I actually wanted to read to you. I was checking to see if I had enough time. It's just a couple of minutes. So a quote from him is, "One day you will wake up and there won't be any more time to do the things you've always wanted. Do it now." The Alchemist, it's been out for a while, so I'm going to do like a little spoiler alert in the next slide. Maybe mute if you're not ready for that, but I feel like it's okay. And then Without Solitude is just a short little piece that I'm going to read for you so you can kind of get a feel for things he speaks about. And then on the next slide, I'll show you his chart, where Mercury is, where the sun is, how for him, and how we can see that in his writing. Okay, so Without Solitude. Without solitude, love will not stay long by your side, because love needs to rest as well, so that it can journey through the heavens and reveal itself in other forms. Without solitude, no plant or animal can survive. No soil can remain productive for any length of time. No child can learn about life. No artist can create. No work can grow and be transformed. Solitude is not the absence of love, but its complement. Solitude is not the absence of company, but the moment when our soul is free to speak to us and help us decide what to do with our life. Therefore, blessed are those who do not fear solitude, who are not afraid of their own company, who are not always desperately looking for something to do, something to amuse themselves with, something to judge. If you are never alone, you cannot know yourself. And if you do not know yourself, you will begin to fear the void. But the void does not exist. A vast world lies hidden in our soul, waiting to be discovered. There it is, with all its strength intact. But it is so new and so powerful that we are afraid to acknowledge its existence. Just as love is the divine condition, so solitude is the human condition. And for those who understand the miracle of life, those two states peacefully coexist. So I share that so you can hear a little bit of his voice and his views before we get into his chart. So here is Polo's chart. And I know that if you're not familiar with astrology, this is just kind of like, what am I looking at? So there's so many things. So I'm trying to hone our focus on the two symbols that we're talking about today. And here, I put them up here as reminders. This one's Mercury and this one's the sun. And since I covered its picture over the numbered pie slices to separate the houses, I added them to the ones we're going to be looking at on the outer wheel here. So let's focus first on Mercury, his planet of the mind and communication, and which house it's in. It's in the fourth house. So I know these things because I've studied them and I practice astrology, and you can go back and reference the earlier slides where I added the house topics for you. But I know that this part of the chart, the fourth house, is the place that really deals with the deepest sense of ourselves, our inner world, our roots, our family, the foundation that we rest upon, homeland. All of these things are embedded in the meaning of the fourth house. So with his Mercury there, we can see through his writing that he was deeply introspective. Themes of self-discovery are very prominent in his writing, turning inward and accessing that really rich inner world. Now, not only is Mercury in the fourth house, but it's also in the sign of Leo. So that's kind of like a cloak that Mercury is wearing. When it is dressed up in Leo, it's going to express in a Leo way. What does that mean? Well, he's very generous with his words. Generosity is a Leo attribute. He has said, I've watched interviews with him looking for little nuggets to really show how this shines through for him. He has said, life is about sharing. Live your personal legend. This is really a story and a life of the hero's journey, of going within. The Alchemist, for those of you who have read it, may remember that it's really about going on a journey far from home and returning and remembering that the gold and the amazingness was really right where you started. So that is a theme that we see in much of his work. Now, this is a little advanced, so I'm not going to get into it, but do you see how there's like a lot of other planets here in the fourth house? This is like a cluster. And when we see 3 or more planets in a house, in astrology, we call that a stellium. Basically, they all mean something and they're all flavoring it. But at the very basic level, it's telling us that this section of the chart, the fourth house for him of introspection, going deeply within, it's very loud. It's underscored for him because of all of that concentration down there with the cluster of planets. For my advanced astrologers in here, we might note that Saturn right here and Pluto are together. This really points to intense discipline and the steady gaze that he holds within himself to excavate buried treasures and really reflect on his life and the hero's journey. So let's set down Mercury for a minute and think about the sun. The sun, as we might recall, really speaks to how you're here to shine, your purpose, your life plot. The sun for him is in the fifth house. The fifth house is the section of the chart that happens to deal with creativity, creative expression, among other things. So his sun, his life purpose and plot shines through creativity. And as another layer, you may recall that Virgo, this is the sign of Virgo, is one of Mercury's homes. So there's this really conducive nature to mercurial things because his sun is shining through Mercury's home in a very dutiful and hardworking way. These are Virgo attributes. And he has said, I write a book to try to understand myself. That is so very Mercury in the fourth house. He's expressing himself, and he's going through the journey and the quest of finding the words that he's sharing outwardly to understand himself. Cheryl Strayed has famously said something very similar. So that's his chart, and where we can see some of his creative signature. Okay, the next one that I have for you is Pearl. I'm sorry about these wonky numbers here. I don't know why that's like that. Pearl S. Buck. She is a writer, or was a writer and a humanitarian, among many other things. Pearl has said the test of a civilization is in the way that it cares for its helpless members. She won the Nobel Prize and Nobel and Pulitzer Prize, Nobel Prize for the Good Earth. And she also was an activist who started the Welcome House Adoption Agency right here in Pennsylvania, in Dublin. You can visit her historic home, which is also the home of her current foundation, Pearl S. Buck International. And she also was a women's and civil rights activist. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Pearl S. Buck, I visited her home and I wrote about it through an astrological lens on my blog. It's titled Pearl S. Buck, Mother, Writer, and Activist, and that's on marjoriecottrell.com. And this picture is when I visited her house in Dublin. This was the typewriter that she bought used and penned the Good Earth on. It was really cool to see. So I've included that here just for fun. Okay. Pearl S. Buck. All right. So let's anchor in the symbols that we are here to explore, which are Mercury and the sun. And it is by coincidence that there's a lot of fourth house stuff here. I kind of did it on purpose as well, because you can see how when things are similar but a little bit different, how they show up. And then the next example that I have is going to be completely different. So we find Pearl's Mercury, the planet of communication and the mind, also down here in the fourth house. This is the place, as we know, because we just went over it with Paulo Coelho's chart, of home, roots, our foundation, homeland, ancestry. So learning and communicating are connected to themes of home for Pearl in a very big way. She was also deeply introspective. So, and we see a cluster here as well. We also see Mercury in the sign of Cancer. Well, let me go back real quick before I get into the Cancer part. Mercury in the fourth house really speaks to Pearl S. Buck. If you're not familiar with her, she was born in 1892 in Hillsborough, West Virginia. And at 3 months old, she moved to China with her parents who were missionaries. And she spent her basically entire life until her late 30s, I believe, in China. She did come back to America for college, and but went back. So the themes of her writing, of her humanitarian efforts, and of also a women's role in the world are very prominent through, her experience. She says that she has said that she felt like she was a child of two worlds, because she grew up in China, and that was where she spent all of her youth and most of her formative years. But her mother was teaching her about her American heritage and reading her textbooks with American history and things like that. And she felt very much like she was a part of both worlds. And I think that there was beauty embedded in that for Pearl, but also difficulty and challenge of finding my place in the world and belonging. She ultimately did come back to the United States, and that's her Dublin estate, that is now a historic home that you can tour, is where she lived later in life. So another layer of this, now we can think about the cloak of Cancer, because Mercury is in the sign of Cancer. So different than Leo, which is what we saw in the last example. She is wearing this Cancerian communication sweater. How is this going to be different? Cancer is a water sign. Cancer, Pisces, and Scorpio are all water signs, which speak to emotions and depth and observation. These are big words that are affiliated with water signs, and water flows. So she had a very feelings-led communication style. She was very observant. Motherhood, homeland, and home, all topics that were central to her writing. And she wrote, one of her books was about raising a child with mental disability, and also about children. She penned over, I think it was like 100 books. So many of them were novels, some of them were children's books, some of them were about mothering, many about women's roles. She was outspoken about her sadness that she saw her mother, being subservient to her father as they were missionaries. So these are themes that we see in her writing. Now, just like we drew a line from Mercury to Virgo in the last example, I'm going to do it again. This is a little bit advanced, but when we think about Mercury's home of Virgo, we can kind of like draw a line from Mercury, boop, up here to this section of the chart, because that's Virgo. So there's some kind of connection through these, because that is Mercury's home, one of Mercury's home signs. So there's a connection here to the sixth house. So we kind of add a layer to her communication by understanding that it's connected to the sixth house. This is the place of service, the place of the daily grind, the place of advocacy, how we work hard and are dutiful. And, she has Saturn here, the planet of hard work as well. So we can see that she was regimented, and she used her voice. She used how she communicated to advocate for people that she wanted to support, that she wanted to speak up for. And she did so prolifically, because she wrote extensively. She was really disciplined in that regard too. She had really clean lines about, she would write early in the morning so that she could tend to the children later in the day. So we see the themes of Cancer, nurturing, communication, and service and advocacy all intertwined. And that is really a lot of what she wrote about. The last piece of her chart here is the sun. The sun is in the sign of Cancer as well. So it's down here with Mercury. So a lot of these stories that I'm talking about are kind of layered with the sun in Cancer. Her purpose is connected to nurturing, reflecting daily life and daily rhythms. She wrote a lot about lack of equality and lack of justice that she had seen and observed, particularly when she lived abroad. And this is also connected to the fifth house of creativity, because the sun, remember, is at home in Leo, and Leo's right here in her fifth house of creativity. So I know that's a lot, but I tried to simplify it to show her the legacy of Pearl's writing, and it lives on through Pearl S. Buck International. All right, so I'm gonna do our third chart and then briefly mention a couple ways to use this, and then I'll take questions. All right, so our last chart is Trevor Hall. So he's a singer-songwriter. He was a self-taught, or is a self-taught guitar player. He sings a lot about beauty, reflection, harmony, radical self-love, devotion, and community. He has described himself as being spiritually hungry. And I include the album title here, so you can kind of like get an idea of how he uses words to express himself. One of his album titles is In Between the In Between. It's all about liminal space, with songs titled Be Who You Are, and thank you for you. So here's Trevor Hall's chart, and it's very different. We see nothing down here in the 4th house, and we're not even going to talk about that section. We are over here. We're looking for Mercury, the planet of communication, and here is Mercury in 12th house. This is a place that really deals with liminal space, the shadow, darkness. So Mercury is in the 12th house of Scorpio. Trevor Hall has an album called The Fruitful Darkness that really speaks to the beautiful challenge of being carried away by darkness and embracing the fertile nature of the shadow. So we also have Pluto here, which we're not really going to get into, but Pluto and Venus representing, intensity and love. His words carry immense depth. They're very powerful. He doesn't swim on the surface. And through his songwriting, he really attempts to articulate what cannot be named or seen. And this is a beautiful, beautiful combination with his son's story in the 1st house. We'll see his son, his path, his purpose is really all about knowing thyself through being on a seeker's quest. So the sun in the 1st house, that's the place of identity, of personality, of character. In modern astrology, if you read a lot about modern astrology, that's the stuff that's really easily accessible, different than this ancient astrology. Modern astrology, a lot of times we'll call the 1st house or the rising sign, the mask that you wear, that you show to the world. But in ancient astrology, ancients really thought of this as the truest essence of ourselves, our true self, our identity, our character, our temperament. So we have his son here showing that a lot of his purpose is seeking self, understanding his identity. And this is his work, this is his quest, so it shines through what he sings about, what he's trying to excavate, all of this liminal space, accessing the shadow, digging in the dirt and seeing like what is in there. Very curious and kind of like he does it with a sparkle in his eye though. Like he's like, yeah, I know that there's so much in here, but this is just so beautiful to dig around in. You'll see that shine through the way that he sings and how he asks so many questions and he's so curious. So he has said, I am obsessed with that journey of going in. And this is a 1st house story of understanding who he is. And the only way to go, you have to go in. That is a really clear signature of somebody whose life story is about, seeking the self through a 1st house. It would be different if the sun was up here in the 10th house. That would be more about like how he's shining out in the world and his reputation and things like that. But no, for him, it's about turning inward and uncovering the self. And the 4th house was similar, but those stories were more about roots and ancestry and, what we're built upon and things like that. So, okay, that's what I have as far as charts. Working with Mercury in a chart, this is for you to do later because, we're limited on time here, but this is all on that worksheet. And what we want to consider is the house. When you pull up your chart and you look for Mercury, look at the house, what pie slice, what number. And then you can see in those charts that I included the topics that are involved with that house. What topics do I like to learn and share? You can write all about this and journal it on the worksheet that I had sent you. Then you add the layer of the sign. We can think of this as a costume. What sign is Mercury in? What kind of jacket is Mercury wearing? How does this flavor my learning and communication style? If you do know what sign Mercury is in, call that forth in your mind right now because we're going to do something next. And then what planets are near or with Mercury. This is a little advanced, but this is going to like adding spices to a recipe. This is going to spice up your messages and show like, are they about depth or are they about like dreaming up what's possible? What planets are with that are going to spice how you communicate. and also how you take in information. Okay, so later on the worksheet, you can use it to consider your communication style, think about how you use knowledge, explore challenges, and consider what comes easily or naturally for you as well, trying to work within those natural tools that you already have and possess. Okay, so how does your Mercury show up? We're going to go through this real quick. So if you have your chart and you know what sign Mercury is in, you could pay attention to this or jot it down. If your Mercury is in the sign of Aries, this may speak to somebody who is initiating, who like raises their hand first or is groundbreaking with what they say. Fast, bravery, may enjoy like a lot of discourse. Caveat, all of these things are generalizations and they're all going to be flavored by very custom placements in the chart, but you got to start somewhere. So that's why I'm doing it this way. Taurus, if your Mercury is in Taurus, you may be a little more diplomatic, a little more strategic, sturdy, grounded. I'm not sure, but I always think of, I don't know his chart, but I always think of Malcolm Gladwell. When I think of Taurus, how he's a storyteller and how he like very slow and steady, like builds it and then like bullets it out and then recaps everything. That's so Taurus in my mind as far as communication style. Gemini, curious, inquisitive, talkative, lots of ideas. A Mercury in Gemini can be like a jar of glitter that like gets hit with a fan. It's just like, whoof, there's so many things to think about and learn. It's also empowered there. So the hardest part about a Mercury in Gemini is choice, choosing what to say, what to learn. I'm speaking from experience. Cancer. If your Mercury is in Cancer, as we saw in Pearl's chart, this is a Mercury that's really going to lead with emotions. It's intuitive and reflective, may deliver words gently in a way that can be really receptive. So if your Mercury is in Leo, as we saw with Paulo Coelho, this is very regal. We saw by like how he was in his photos too. Like that's how we communicate also. Regal, generous with words, and maybe even be like a visual or tactile learner. Virgo, this is Mercury's other home sign. If you have your Mercury in Virgo, this really points to being able to grasp and deliver fine print, like editing skills, like a really good detail-oriented mind. That's an innate skill set of yours. Libra, diplomatic, indecisive, very justice-centric. May use your voice to amplify, what is just and what is right. Scorpio, this is protective. Instincts may guard information and release it when the time is right. Scorpios can play the long game, so you may be really good at research or going on missions that ask you to go dive deep into gathering your information, being very perceptive, not really letting anybody know what's happening until the time is right. So that's one of your natural skills. Sagittarius may be a little more playful, crafty with words. There's something about a Mercury in Sagittarius that may invite in a little bit of miscommunication for technical reasons that we won't get into here, but knowing that can be helpful because it doesn't mean that you're doomed, but it does mean that you might feel a little more drained because you're feeling misunderstood. So you're putting in a lot of concentrated efforts to craft your message. That might be something that a Mercury in Sagittarius deals with. Capricorn, focused, systematic, no frills. These are, steady, bullet pointed people who can really organize and synthesize all the parts of the novel or all the parts of the book and is very good at keeping it in order and moving towards the goal, focused on the goal and not being, distracted by all the other fun ideas. Aquarius, your Mercury in Aquarius may be a visionary, intellectual, and unique. Unique individuation is a part of your expression with a Mercury in Aquarius. Mercury in Pisces, These are our poets, our dreamer, sensitive, empathetic, supportive. The cool thing about Pisces is that it doesn't really conform to stylistic rules. The challenge with that might be confusion, but it might also be creatively playing outside the box. Okay, so this you could go back to later. There, I just popped that in there again so you can think about which house Mercury is in for you. And just a couple of minutes here on what do we do with this information? Of course, you can do whatever you would like with it, but some insights are you can use this as a team building tool. You can use astrological insights for communication within groups. When I was in grad school with my husband, we had to take a Myers-Briggs assessment together. And, everyone in the class did. And I realized, I think we had just gotten married, so we were newlyweds. And I was realizing why he was acting a certain way when we get into arguments and why I was acting a certain way when we get into arguments. And I was like, oh, this is really helpful. So different than the Myers-Briggs, but similar. You can work, I like to use it as a team building tool. I've done different team building workshops with people who work together. And this is a really good tool to understand our communication styles and understand the communication styles of those we love or those we work closely with, and see how they differ and be more flexible with allowing each other to work within the parameters of our natural styles. Another way to use this is to communicate in your unique style. This can reflect back to you. How do you take in information? How do you process it? How does it feel natural to share it? Sometimes the way that we are taking and giving information, it doesn't mesh well with the way that it is coming at us. And that's okay to not beat yourself up over not receiving the information, or it's just not landing. Maybe you're somebody who needs to read it. Maybe you're somebody who needs to listen to it. Maybe you're somebody who needs to paint it to understand it. We all learn and express in different ways. Exploring the symbolism of your innate messenger. This is what that worksheet is for. What sign or house is it in? What do you naturally love to learn? This is going to shine out. Intrinsic inspiration is going to come forth when you lean into your natural mercurial placement. Be curious about what is yours to share. Know when to consume and when to create. This is really just embedded in mercurial things. Sometimes, when we take in, we become saturated. And it can't just sit in us because it might become stagnant. So know when you're full and when to get that out. Sometimes it might be through writing, but sometimes it might be through going for a walk in nature or making something with our hands, painting something, doing a craft. Understanding the flow of how consumption feels in our body and how creation feels in our body can really support us in our creative endeavors. And what is your message? Let this guide your communication at all times. What are you birthing into the world? We would look for the sun and the house placement for this, in addition to our mercurial placement. How are you communicating what you're birthing into the world? And believe in yourself. Know the limits of your charts. Knowing the limits of your charts, we can play and thrive within them. So I like to think of our charts as a greenhouse, and sometimes we may be limited. In our always we're limited, time, money, energy. We need to choose how we're going to use our resources. And instead of feeling like I don't have enough, I like to think of it as a greenhouse and understanding my limits so that I can play and grow within them. Our charts show us what we're here to explore is one of my favorite quotes by my mentor, Adam Ellenboss, that I like to share. And here we are at the end. So seeing astrology in action in our own charts helps us understand how we can use it as a writing tool to utilize our innate strengths and abilities. So if you wanted to raise your hand and share anything about how you relate to these findings or have just an opportunity to share, we could do that now. And this is how you can reach me. Thank you all for listening. I hope that was fun, informative, thought-provoking. and useful for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marjorie. Really appreciated the session. I know everyone else did too. I'm going to share some links in the chat. Check those out. The first one is a feedback survey. You can let Marjorie know what a great job she did. I should have edited that. Spring classes are over, but summer and fall classes will be announced as soon as possible. Upcoming events, we'll have a little bit of a break from Thursdays on the Stoop while for the summer while we're doing some planning, but creative co-working will be continuing throughout the summer, and that's just a drop-in virtual session for getting some work done with your friends. And then lastly, but not least, support Blue Stoop. If you would like to pitch in to support free programs like this one, just go to bluestoop.org/donate or click that link in the chat. We're also going to be kicking off a fundraising campaign in a few days, which I'll share in the newsletter. And that will be specifically to fund free programs. So keep an eye out for that. Appreciate your support. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. Thanks again.